Hey, YouTube. Hey, Martin.
Hey, Michael.
Excellent to have you here on the stream and very shortly on Talk Python. Everyone out there watching the live stream, thanks for being here. If you got thoughts and ideas and comments, please put them into the live chat and we'll make them part of the show if we can. Makes sense. And for those of you watching later, thanks for watching later. We don't have time travel, so no help with the comments, but thanks anyway. All right, Martin, ready to kick this off?
Yeah, definitely.
Martin, welcome to Talk Python to me.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's really great to have you here. I'm super excited to learn about H2O Wave. It looks like a really cool project that's one of these enabling, empowering projects for people who don't feel like, oh, I could take my whatever I'm building, my ML model or whatever, or my data analysis and turn it into a website or an app or any of those sorts of things. And they'll see that they can with Wave, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, should be tons of fun. I think it's going to be a relevant topic for a lot of people. Before we get to any of it, though, tell me about your background. How did you get into programming in Python?
So I would say I got just like most of people do. I went to college, studied programming, computer science, and then I started working originally as a Java developer, actually. Then switched to web developer because there was a lack of front-end engineers. And once I joined H2O, I mostly work on front-end here as well, but I somehow got in charge of this Python framework. So need to write a lot of Python on day-to-day basis as well.
Yeah, that's cool. I think one of the big ironies of these like data science tools and these nice Python visualization tools is they're there to let people write Python so they don't have to write a ton of front end code or those kinds of things, or write their own web frameworks or use Vue or React. And yet people like you who actually make them, you spend so much time in the JavaScript side of things, right? I mean, same thing for Jupyter. It's someone's got to do it. And you're kind of doing it for everyone else who uses it and gets to avoid it, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you have a look at it, then front-end engineering is quite complex topic these days compared to what it has been, let's say, 10 years ago. So
you mean it's more than just linking to jQuery on a CDN?
definitely.
It used to be so straightforward, and it really is. If you don't do it day to day, it's like, how do I even get started to get this app up and going? It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we are here today, to talk about how to make everyone's life easier.
That's right. Well, everyone but yours. You take the pain for the rest of us.
Yeah,
Which is right.
but I kind of enjoy it, so that's not a problem.
Yeah, of course. If you love it, then it's all good. Before we get into Wave, you said you switched over to front end stuff. What are your front end technology favorites, like front end frameworks and stuff?
To be honest, I don't like frameworks at all. I like web as a platform because it also has become very powerful. We have a lot of stuff that we didn't have before. But if you want to build something enterprisey or something that needs a longer maintenance, then you need to reach out for frameworks. So currently I work in React, which is, I would say, industry standard, but also have experience with Vue or Angular. So at the end of the day, it's just a tool in our toolbox.
Pick one and go with it. And other front end question, straight JavaScript or TypeScript?
Definitely TypeScript all the way.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, once you try TypeScript, then there's no way back.
Okay. I've done a little bit of TypeScript, but not enough to really pick it up, I don't think. My JavaScript front end experience is pretty limited. I try to stick with the Python side of things, the server side type of things as much as possible. Speaking of which, sticking with Python, I guess maybe could get to the other question of what do you do day to day, kind of edge our way into this project. Day to day, you work on this H2O, right?
Exactly. So basically, I work on H2O Wave, which is a framework for not only data scientists and people making AI models to make their life easier, as you have already said, and to allow them to build web applications without regular web knowledge like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And my day-to-day consists of basically helping people out community-wise, answering questions, getting new feature requests in. Then I have also two people, two developers that I help with bringing their issues up, unblocking them. Then I also need to code some bigger features. And basically, speaking on podcasts, if I have time.
Yeah, it sounds a little bit like a blend between sort of a program manager, software developer on one half, and then dev evangelist almost on the other.
Yeah, in country where I come from, we call it a girl for everything. So basically, you need to jump on a lot of heads.
Yeah, perfect. All right, well, give us the quick elevator pitch of H2O Wave. It's for people. The headline, I guess, the H1 of your website, if you will, is make AI apps.
Yeah, that's right. So basically, as I've already said, H2O Wave is a framework that allows you to build web applications and dashboards with nothing but Python. No CSS, no HTML, no JavaScript required. However, if you wish to sprinkle a little bit of JavaScript or CSS, then you definitely can. It's not a problem. And basically, we try to build a rich library of widgets or components that are ready to use and that should cover a wide range of scenarios that people might encounter. So at the end of the day, you end up with a very little bit of Python code that does very much, basically.
Yeah, let's set the stage a little. Maybe thinking about what options do people have today? They've got an ML model that makes predictions, or maybe they've got something that will slice and dice the data and turn it into a graph, but you want to let them maybe pick the country by which you pull the data from, or the time range, or some other aspect, and make it a little bit interactive, or even not. If you don't have that option, just make it static, I guess. Like, what are the different things people are doing now that might relate to this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the simplest thing that people can do is the regular tool of their interest is Jupyter Notebook, which is very user-friendly. You have just a single prompt, which you type into, and that behaves as a REPL. And basically, what they get in response are just static images of graphs or whatever, and these then can be then copy pasted as screenshots to either PowerPoint presentations or whatnot. However, this approach is, as you have said, somewhat static and can be not so engaging, let's say. So that's where web applications come into play, which can sprinkle a little bit of interactivity. So let's say you have a sidebar that has various controls like filters, or maybe some sliders that adjust model values. And on the right side, you get your visualization interactively in real time. So this is something that has more storytelling power, let's say. And H2O Wave was initially built with this in mind as well.
Right. And Jupyter is fantastic. I mean, so many people work in Jupyter and do amazing things. but it's not necessarily what you deliver to an end user, right? If the CEO of your company says, "Hey, I want you to give me a dashboard that helps me understand, say, sales and cost this month." You probably aren't going to just point them at your Jupyter notebook on GitHub. You probably still are not even going to point them at a version running on your server, right? What if they want that updated every minute, with like
Exactly.
highlights or important stuff, and they want to access it on their phone in a way that is like, you have more control over how it lays out. And, it's just, Jupyter is great, but it's not an end user technology. It's an enabling technology, right? It's like saying, well, I'm going to give PyCharm to a user to run my app. It's like, well, no. It's cool if you could run your code, but that's not the tool that you give them to do it with, right? You package it up into a .app or whatever you're after.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of the gap you're trying to close, right?
That's right.
Well, cool. Okay. Now, when I hear that, I think of a couple of other projects. Streamlit, I interviewed Adrian back, I think it was 2019, who founded Streamlit. And Streamlit is about building these really simple dashboards, right? Sort of interactive places where, say, on the left, you've got a few things you can change. And on the right, you might have some kind of graph, or you might get a 404 if you're clicking through the gallery right now. But this is in that realm. And then also Plotly Dash as well. Give us a sense of like how those compare, because there's probably people listening who are like, well, yeah, I'm really interested in this, but I've already considered working with Streamlit. Should I choose H2O Wave, or should I stick with Streamlit, or whatever?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, one of the main reasons that the Wave was built, because it's very similar to the project that you mentioned, is that we were not very satisfied with either performance, and the second reason was that, for example, Streamlit apps used to be very resource heavy. That means a lot of money in production costs. So the reason was that Streamlit used to run a separate process for every single browser tab, which of course demanded a lot of memory. However, I've checked before this podcast to be 100% sure, and it seems like they migrated to a single-threaded async IO approach since then, which is the same approach that, let's say, Dash or H2O Wave also follow. So this is not a differentiator anymore. The biggest differentiator is that H2O Wave has the most features, let's say, most widgets for you to use. And we also haven't seen any, let's say, regular web application beyond these filters and sliders that change your model outputs. But with H2O Wave, we've seen like web applications that you would guess maybe only software engineers could build, not the data scientists.
Right. So, for example, with Streamlit, what I often get, like, here I pulled up an example that they have, some real-time text thing, and what you get is kind of this interactive. This one doesn't even have a sidebar. It's pretty nice. So you can got a little drop down and a button to start working with it, but you don't have like a footer and a nav bar and multiple things on there with responsive layout and like a lot of the stuff you would expect, right? It's still pretty close to what you might see on a notebook. As nice as it is, I do really like Streamlit.
Yeah, exactly. We call this concept toy apps, let's say. These are more like POCs and the stuff that we have talked a while ago. Wave is originally built with this in mind, but then somehow grew much larger. That we can talk about it in a minute.
Yeah, it it definitely seems like it's grown a bit more. I haven't checked up on Streamlit enough to be able to follow along with exactly how many widgets they have and so on. But yeah,
And also
maybe compared to Plotly Dash as well.
yes, so I'm not very experienced with Plotly, but
Neither am
I
I, to be
assume
honest.
it's the same story there. So they have a few form widgets like text boxes, sliders, drop downs, etc., that let you control the visualizations. But also, if you have a look, these visualizations that you present, and these are like 3D models for our listeners who can see our screen, are most likely just some third-party JavaScript library, which means that it's not necessarily a part of Plotly Dash. So no Python API.
Right. Okay. So if we look over here at H2O Wave, you know, the headline is "Make AI Apps," but it sounds to me like a broad range of apps could really land here if you're interested in almost any kind of reporting, dashboard, visualization. Give us some ideas of the types of apps that people are building here.
Yes. So the most common applications are the toy apps, as we have already discussed. But once people truly discovered the power of Wave, then they started to amaze us as developers, because they started to build like production grade applications that could be deployed and put to production and work just fine, right? So for example, H2O organized a public, let's say, hackathon that aimed to save or to predict wildfires in California. I believe in California, maybe in the whole world. And one kind of software engineer built a truly wonderful web app that allowed them to submit their models, to preview them, to make scoreboard and everything within web application. And it took him like 2 weeks, which is like incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But maybe some success story from a data scientist context, let's say. We have a team at H2O that wasn't very happy with one of our data science products. So they decided, let's build one ourselves. And the result was that they have built, it's called Hydrogen Torch, and it's a framework for deep learning. And the result is a Wave application that was built within a week or two as an initial concept. And it has features like you can train your models, you can see how it predicts, let's say, computer vision models with image annotations. It has support for audio, if I remember correctly. And it's, yeah, exactly. And it's simply just everything that you can expect from a regular web application. And that blew my mind, because the guys behind Hydrogen Torch are not software engineers. They are purely data scientists. They are even Kaggle grandmasters, for those who are aware of Kaggle platform. And they were able to build it themselves, which is
that's
mind-blowing
fantastic
to me.
Hydrogen Torch. Okay. Yeah, I haven't heard of that. It looks pretty cool. It has experiment flow and dataset connectors and even pre-processed datasets.
Yes, and remember that these features were built by data scientists, which is something that you would typically require hold a software engineering team, right?
Right, and they probably didn't even use any TypeScript or React.
No.
No, that's cool. I think maybe to make this a little bit concrete to help people get a sense of how you work with this and what it has to offer, I want to maybe talk through two areas. I want to talk through kind of getting started, what it looks like to write some code here, and also maybe talk through some of the widgets, because as you pointed out, if you look through the widgets section, it's like a multi-level hierarchy of things, but there's several hundred widgets that you can use. So that's a lot to just be able to, write a few one line of Python and bring in some amazing UI element, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But let's start with going through the tutorial. So we can talk through maybe a couple of these because I think they're a little bit interesting. They're all quite short. And I'll keep it simple because I know code on the internet is hard, but just to kind of give you a sense of like some of the moving parts. So in order to do any of this stuff, maybe we should also think a little bit about the architecture. Is you have a Wave server and you have Wave applications, right? You write these Wave applications in Python, but the server itself is like a Go centralized host, like MicroWhiskey or GUnicorn or something, but for Wave, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
basically, as you have said, that there are two parts, Wave server and Wave application. Wave server is written in Golang, and it provides one of the highlight features, let's say, of Wave, and that is seamless integration with OpenID Connect, which is authentication, let's say, authentication protocol, because most of your enterprise applications need to be secured somehow, right? And as a data scientist, you just don't want to and cannot do that yourself because it's security-wise threat, let's say.
Yeah, sure. And even if you did, a lot of the OAuth flow requires you setting up certain endpoints, and it's tricky.
Yeah, exactly. It's tricky even for regular software engineers. So that's why we provide this feature out of the box, and it's provided by Wave server, which our Wave app, which is a Python server, connects to and talks to browser through as a proxy, let's say. So all the data goes from Python application to Wave server, and then Wave server keeps an open WebSocket connection with browser to perform real-time stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so to get started, you start the Wave server, create a virtual environment, pip install H2O Wave, and then that's it. You just have that one dependency. I guess you might have to pip install H2O Wave before you can start the server if you haven't got it or like globally available, but then you just have to write a little bit of code. Now there's some interesting paradigms that you've chosen here. A lot of the web frameworks are stateless, right? Here's an endpoint, and the only thing this endpoint knows about anything is that here's the request coming in. Maybe a cookie is passed, maybe a query string is passed, or a form. But other than that, like it's separate, unknown, unrelated, no history, right? And with these apps, it's a little bit more like a single running script that has a bit of a memory, right?
Yes. So basically, a Wave has two concepts, let's say. One are Wave scripts, and the other one is Wave app. And the difference is that Wave script is, as the name suggests, it's just a script. So you write the Python code, you invoke it like let's say Python hello world.py, not like you would do with the normal regular Python script. And what that does is it converts your Python script Wave data into a JSON, sends it to Wave server, and keeps it there. So that means that your Python process is finished, and you only serve your data from Wave server to your users, which is much more performant than if you had to rerun the script for every single user as you would normally do.
Yeah. Okay.
And another concept is a Wave app, which is something that most our users use.
Yeah.
And Wave app lets you add interactivity, because with Wave scripts are more suited for dashboards, which are just static read-only web apps, let's say, and you can even update it as you wish. But with Wave application, you probably want to handle your button clicks or drop-down changes, and all this needs to be recorded back on Python server and
Right.
handled.
Yeah, you're going to trigger elements of the page changing and things of that sort. So one thing that's interesting here is you create a site by giving it an endpoint like /hello, and you could have multiple ones of these running on the Wave server, right? These multiple scripts or multiple apps. And then you start working with these widgets, and these widgets can be composable and hierarchical, and they feel a little bit like almost like working with Flutter, right? You have these UI elements, and you might have like a layout which has a grid, and into the grid you might put a table, and into the table you might put cards, right? You kind of build this up in code mostly. You can use HTML and other templating languages, but mostly you write it in code by, first, this example you have here, you just say, I'm going to create a UI.markdown card, right?
Yes, so basically the basic building block of Wave, be it scripts or apps, is something called card. So even in the example in front of us, you have specified UI.markdown card, which is, as the name suggests, a card that lets you display Markdown and interpret it. And that's about it. You put your cards into the layout, and that's it.
Yeah,
Very
you also have
straightforward.
the idea of basically a grid layout where you can position these cards to be in a certain offset and a certain size, right? So in your Hello World example, you have the position is box 1122, which means the top left, and then too wide, too tall.
Yes, exactly. So the box 1122 means column 1, row 1, and width 2 and height 2. And we also support another type of layout, and that's responsive layouts for more advanced users. This grid layout is more like the simplest layout that we could write, but it's fixed. So it means that it may not work well on every single screen. But if you want,
Sure.
if you want more responsiveness, then definitely go for responsive layout, which is based on Flexbox.
Right. So maybe it's 5 wide if you got a big screen, but if it's on a phone, they just all go vertical.
Exactly.
Okay. And let's see, what else do I want to call here? All right, I think that one's pretty good. You also have this idea of editing your page from the REPL. So after you've run that, you can then just fire up Python and start working with it again. How does that work?
It's mostly just for playing around. I don't think that...
Maybe debugging?
Yeah, maybe debugging, but I don't think that people would develop that way. It's just to show people that it's really nothing but Python, and no hidden concepts, nothing like that. So you can basically hit up your REPL and work from there as well if you want to.
Yeah, but what's surprising to me is you can exit your Python script, and then you can open the REPL, import the code, and then make some calls to it, and it actually changes the running code that I see, right?
Yeah, basically the magic behind that is, if you notice, we have that page.save function, which basically what it does is it makes a diff of what has changed from your previous save and sends it over to the Wave server. And Wave server then deals with that and displays whatever changes you have made.
So since this is a static file, effectively, it's just there's a singleton copy on the server that everybody's requesting.
Exactly. That's why it's very suitable for dashboards.
Sure. So another thing that jumps out is you make this change, and then people who have the browser open to that page, it just changes. They don't have to reload, right? It has built-in kind of smart hot reload. Tell us about that.
Exactly. So this one of the things that I think that may be appealing even to, let's say, regular software engineers, because the problem with software engineers is like if you present them with framework like this, then they want to have more control, right? We as software developers, we need to have control over everything. That's why we don't like, let's say, WordPress.
That's our great undoing. The shiny new thing, and we have to create it ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. But the problem with, let's say, the typical approach to building a web application today, which is a single-page applications, is that all the initial triggers need to be done from client side, from the browser. But if you want to reflect changes that happened on the backend side, then this can be a bit problematic. You either need to introduce polling, which means calling your Wave server, your backend regularly, but that may not be ideal because you can flood your server unnecessarily.
I don't know why we can only support 20 users at a time. This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Or you can use WebSockets, which is not so easy to implement, let's say.
No.
And what Wave uses is exactly these WebSockets. So it allows you to push changes from server to UI seamlessly. And that's also one of the wonderful features of Wave.
Right. So basically, the takeaway from most people is as you develop your code, as you develop your project, your app, you'll have it maybe open on the side in your browser. You make some changes. If you just hit save, then it should automatically, maybe you have to rerun your script, but you won't have to go and refresh your browser as well, right?
Yes, exactly. And even with the Wave applications, we use UVkern as an underlying Python server, which has built-in hot reload. And that means that you can just save your file and everything reloads automatically.
Cool. So UVacorn is watching your Python files for changes. So when you save, it automatically restarts it. You don't even have to do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's restarted, and also your browser is refreshed.
Yep. Okay. Fantastic. So that's a pretty cool little hello world. The next one is to get the browser to sing 99 bottles of beer on the wall, which is a fun little demo. But this one takes us from, this one is still a script so far, right?
Yes.
And then the next one will convert it to an app. Okay. So for this one, the core takeaway here is basically a way to introduce like pushing updates from the server to the client. So for example, people don't know, there's the 99 bottles of beer in the wall, 99 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 98, then 97, then 96, right? So you wanted to have it like keep doing that over and over and over. So if this was a console app, how would I do it? I would probably say for I in range and just for 99 and then 90, and I would just print. What you can do with Wave is you can have that exact same super straightforward for loop, and then you just go to your card that you put in the page, and you just say content equals some f string, right? That verse for that number. And then you just call page, and then you don't want it to happen as fast as possible. So you sleep, right? Make it come out a little bit slower. But that does the multicast broadcast to all the clients watching just straight away, right? Just loop over the code, make some changes, and that will automatically push it. I guess you got to call
Exactly.
save, but then it'll push it. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, thanks. And all the way, by the way, just not to forget, the original author of this framework is not me, but it's my boss, Prithvi Prabhu, which I would like to give shout out to because he is the mastermind behind all this framework.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. It's definitely a cool framework. So this opens up a lot of possibilities, right, for people coming to your site and getting some form of interactivity. Now, one thing you said is like I could build, say, like a chat app or like some kind of bot. And what I've seen so far, it feels like what is happening on the server is shared with everyone rather than dedicated to a particular user or group of users. How do I combine this to say, like, I want them to sing this song, but I want everyone maybe who logs in to have their own copy, right? Like Sarah came 30 seconds later. She shouldn't join the song halfway through or a third of the way through. She should get it from 99 going down.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. The reason that you see it for every single tab the same output is because we are only looking at the scripts, which in case of dashboards, that's totally understandable, right? Everybody should see the same dashboard because the data is always the same. But with web apps, you get the basically the common behavior as you would suggest. So every tab can have its own state.
I see.
So let's
Is
say
it
if
like
you
its
have
own session, basically?
exactly. So if you have, let's say, a counter app that has a single button, and once you click it, then it increments counter. You can basically have a single button instance for every single tab if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have something called multicast and broadcast modes. And that means that the value could be synced across every single tab if you wanted to. But the default mode is called unicast, and that means that the change is only propagated to the current client, which is browser
I see.
tab.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe this is a good time to pause going through some of these code examples and some of these capabilities. And Bhavani has a good question. Like, what databases are supported? Not necessarily even just databases, but like, where does this code run? Is this PyScript and PyIodide? Is this on the server? Right? Like, what capabilities do I have? Can I pip install whatever I want? Or am I really limited?
Sky is the limit, because all the code is running in server. So that means that you can basically connect to any database of your choice, the same way as you would do, let's say, in Django or Flask app. And so basically, you can pip install anything you want on your server.
I see. So if it's supported with Python, or in some crazy indirect way that you might write some C, you could call from Python, you could call it, then it's going to be like, it's full Python. So it does whatever you want it to do.
Exactly. Whatever you can make Python to do, then it's possible in Wave as well.
Sure. That's really good to know. All right. So I guess maybe the third thing that really is, let's talk about two things real quick before I get to the third one here. One thing that's kind of interesting is what you're setting here in this example is in the for loop, you're saying the content is this F string, and you regenerate the entire F string. And for this example, it's like a tiny little, it's a verse in a song, and who cares? But if this was a much more interesting, like a full-on Jinja style template, and you want to just change one little small piece, round tripping that full HTML every time is not the most efficient. So what you have, because you're doing WebSockets, is you have this idea of like an expression to send some values over. So you pass a dictionary of the values, and then you set the content to be an expression, a little handlebar thing like a JavaScript front-end binding or a Jinja value, something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about this and how that works.
Yeah, so basically, it works. Basically, what you always send just the difference, the diffs, or let's say deltas of what has changed to the UI. And once these changes are arrive to the browser, then React takes over it and renders whatever changes have come, right? So in this particular case, the first change would be the whole string, because there is nothing else there. It would be rendered, but all the subsequent updates will only contain changes in form of dictionary values, which is much less to care about on the network bandwidth side. And once these values arrive, then React again takes over and does its magic and updates the UI correctly.
Yeah, that's really neat. So really great way to be super efficient just by setting some values like on your card.data. Whatever you want to call it, and then call save, and those correspond over to your expression, right? That makes up your template.
Yeah, and that's even more important in our domain, because data scientists usually have a lot of data, extremely a lot of data. And that means that they would like to push it all into browser and render their plots. But if they did on every single update, then it might not be the best way, right? So
right.
that's why we have.
If you've got a great big page and a tiny little plot that you want to change, it'd be better to just say, just change that plot, but leave all the other stuff there.
Yeah,
alone.
exactly.
Cool. All right, let's talk the last little thing here about how this looks if we make it an app. I think
you need to go to the to-do list.
The list, okay.
Or maybe bean counter, maybe.
I think the bean counter. Let's do I think the bean counter one. Yeah, the bean counter one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is a real simple one. So the bean counter one is like a button. You press it, it just goes 1, 2, 3, 4, right? It shows things like state though and whatnot. But tell us, how does it look different to create something like in the script? I didn't do anything hardly about like URLs or functions to call or returning. I just did some stuff and then it somehow magically changed. But this looks a little bit more like Flask, right?
Yes. So the difference in syntax is that you need to have a single function that's asynchronous, because we use async IO in order not to block your UI. And that function needs to be annotated with an add-app annotation that takes a single required parameter, which is a URL path that you want your app to be listened on. And within this
can I listen
function,
a /? Like all these examples are like / and /hello and so on.
You can use also a root, which will be just the /, and that's
okay. Yeah, okay.
And just to get back, so the annotate function will give you one parameter, which is q, and that stands for query. And that allows you to control your wave app. So it has methods like q.save or qPageSave, I would say.
Yeah,
qPageSave, which is an equivalent of page.save in our previous script example. And you also, instead of page dictionary that you put your cards in, you need to just prefix it with q. So you end up with q, page, and then you specify your card.
And this is how you get the per user type of thing, because that queue is probably tied to them, right?
Not necessarily. The per user thing is by default, but if you go to the app annotation, you can specify mode there. So by default, it's
Okay.
unicast, and that's how it distributes the changes. The queue is more like, you can think of it as a source of what has changed and how to update your UI. So when we go through the example further, you will see that it can also store some local state or app-wide state, etc.
Okay. One of the things that really jumped out to me was seeing the async and await stuff everywhere. So you have an async method, you call await page.save, queue.page.save, and presumably if you want to work with Beanie and MongoDB, you could use its async API. If you want to call an API endpoint with HTTPX, you could await those calls, right? So it really allows you to create really scalable code, right?
Yeah, definitely. And especially the reason why it's async is because if you had a case like you had a single app which has two users, and the first user would create some blocking action, then it would block also the second user because server is busy, right? It cannot respond. So that's why you need to make everything asynchronous.
Mm-hmm. And you said you're using UV Acorn behind the scenes, so that's a great server for this kind of code.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It does a lot of heavy lifting for us. So
yeah, absolutely. It's really good to build on it. Is it running some kind of Python framework that we don't see, like a Flask or Fast API or something, or is it just all custom?
it uses Starlet, although I'm not sure if it's actual server because I'm not very familiar with it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so
apart from
Starlet's
that,
the same foundation as Fast API and other things as well. So that's cool. All right. Well, there's a cool getting started people can walk through and check it out. It's pretty interesting because it is a different programming model compared to how many people would be familiar with Flask and those types of things that are very stateless, and you've got to somehow figure out how to get their session and then store that in a database or a Redis queue and then get that back and then regenerate it, right? You have this information more round trip. I think it'll resonate with a lot of people. It's definitely easier. So I want to talk about the widgets, but actually, before we talk about the widgets, let's touch on one thing over in the examples here. Templates. So when I write traditional web applications, let's call them, I'll create an HTML file, and I'll probably use some template language like Chameleon or Jinja 2 or Django templates and pass a dictionary over there. But I mostly think about what's on the page by structuring an HTML file that has CSS and JavaScript and placeholders for my things to go into and loops, and that sort of thing. Is there a way in H2O Wave to have some kind of template like that?
Definitely.
Okay.
Although we do not encourage it very much because we usually tend to think about using your custom HTML as an escape hatch, let's say, and instead we try to provide you with Python APIs whenever possible. But if you really want, there is also HTML templating if you need to, and that's also work the same way as we described the script data updates. So it takes one dictionary with the values and then an HTML with the templating language.
Right. Does it do the partial updates based on that as well? Or does it round trip the template, the whole thing? Do you know?
I'm not sure about that one, but I would say it also is capable of partial updates.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, this looks really neat. So basically, the examples that you have here are you have a little tiny fragment, like a fragment of HTML that'll go into the page, and then that's the template. It sounds a little bit like Vue components and that style.
Yeah, and
Where
maybe
we put the
one
code
more.
and the markdown a little bit together.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe one more interesting thing to note, because the app that we are currently looking at is called H2O Wave Tour, and that's also a Wave app in itself. So you can see it looks nice, even though you have a smaller screen. And it's a perfect example of what Wave is capable, because all the code that we see in front of us is rendered in VS Code editor, which is called Monaco editor. And that's implemented via incorporating custom JavaScript into Wave. So that means if you really need to include some third-party libraries in JavaScript, then we got you covered as well. So
That's really awesome. Yeah, so this H2O Wave tour lets you run the code locally and explore it and search through the different examples, which is really fantastic. So if you go to the website, there's a getting started that shows you how to get this up and running. What we get is a navbar across the top, and then like a drop-down combo box and a next previous button. On the right side of the page, we have the rendered output that's live. And then on the left side, we have the code that makes it happen. So what you're telling me is that little square on the left pane of my two-pane window, that's basically VS Code?
Yes, you can edit it. You have even snippets.
Oh.
So if you can try to type into it and hit W and let's say button, or maybe not. Maybe I remembered wrongly. Try command.
Maybe my ad blockers make it angry as well. You never know.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that's cool. Yeah, you get like highlighting and indentations and
yeah, and you can edit it, and your changes should be reflected on the right side as well.
Yeah,
so it's kind of interactive.
Yeah, you can just sit there and edit them. That's a really cool way to play with it, right? You know, you have stuff that'll say take you to Replit or whatever. And there's all these panes like, well, okay, what do I click to actually make this show up, and where's it supposed to go? This is a really cool way to explore, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so the thing I wanted to talk about was these templates. So there is some way to do little bits, but it sounds to me more like it's a little bit this component model, like this little section, this card that we're going to put somewhere on the screen. Here's its little fragment of HTML that is an expression that goes with it.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, yeah. Very, very neat. The other one that's pretty nice is Markdown. You have nice support for just Markdown out of the box. So I think that's great. You have there's hundreds of examples, and so people can go play with it. But there's a couple for the different how Markdown gets applied and used. Let's see. Another thing, you talked about you told me to type like W button and hitting tab. So that's part of one of the code extensions or plugins, depending on the editor you're using. So you have VS Code and you have PyCharm plugins that allow us to create things like if I got a form or something, right? I could type like W form tab, and it would go potentially create some kind of UI element instead of me having to do that, right? Or if I want to get a scaffold up a starter application.
Yes, that's right. So we have VS Code extension and PyCharm plugin, which have the same features. And the features are, one is code snippets, or let's say templates, that allows you to streamline your typing a little bit. So you don't need to think about what are the possible attributes in the button, for example. You can just, yeah, there's a nice little demo. So you can just type W underscored and your card name, and it will basically give you all the code that is needed. And the second part is an advanced autocomplete, because most of the stuff in Wave is based on dictionaries, which are dynamic in their nature, so there is not much that the type system can infer. So we help with that a little bit as well.
Yeah. It's amazing how much those sort of focused templates are like, I'm here to create UI widgets. I'm telling you, this reminds me a lot of Flutter. I don't know if you've done anything with Flutter.
Just a little bit.
But like the sort of style of like the way you create these sort of nested UI widgets and then the editor tools to build them. It's really nice. I like it. But yeah, I certainly, if people are going to build real apps with this, they should be considering these extensions or plugins, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So Phil on the audience has an idea. It says, less intelligent, more basic. This might provide an easy way to build a personal media streaming service on my Raspberry Pi and a remote control interface to control and view from my phone. What do you think? Can you build a remote control?
Go for it.
Cool. I'd say it sounds pretty possible.
Also,
a little bit short. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Michael. Just a quick note that we are very interested in everything that our community does. So if you have some cool Wave app, don't hesitate and bring it up with us. You can go to our GitHub discussions, and there we have a discussion dedicated to a community showcase. So,
yeah, if you, definitely a good idea. A lot of things I want to ask you about, but we're going to run out of time. So let's talk about deployment. So, and is this a thing I have to buy in order to use H2O Wave? So suppose I have a virtual Linux server at Linode. I want to run this there. Could I do it?
Definitely. Wave is 100% free of charge, so you can use it even for commercial projects. Our license permits it. And you can deploy it wherever you want. We even have some blog posts about deploying Wave apps on Heroku. And we plan to also add for, let's say, AWS, EC2, or Linode, or whatever.
Yeah.
And however, if you are enterprise, then the part of our business model is that we basically provide the cloud solution for app deployment for you. So that's about it, I would say.
Okay, so if I have like a team of data scientists and I don't want a dedicated H2O Wave DevOps person, I can just pay you all some sort of money and you'll set up some number of apps. How's the pricing work there?
I'm not sure because I'm not working on the cloud side of things, but just to give you maybe more, just to shed more light on our initial intentions with Wave, we wanted to solve basically three problems. One was building nice UIs. Second was authentication out of the box, because this is painful. And the third one was deployment, because if you are a data scientist, you probably don't know much about it, right?
Right.
So that's where our cloud platform comes to play, which allows you to easily deploy your Wave apps using a CLI. It's basically like Heroku, let's say.
Cool. So your business model is basically H2O Wave is free. open source. People can deploy it where they want, but if they don't want to manage the running and upgrading and backups and all that, they can buy that as a service from you.
Exactly.
Yeah, that sounds fair. Is it hard to set up if I want to host it myself?
No, not really. Basically, the simplest thing that you need to do is just hit wave run and then your app.py, and that should basically run your application. You expose your correct ports, and that's it. And we also
I suppose I could put it behind Nginx successfully.
yes,
Or do I
that's
have to do
also
something
possible.
special? I got to do something special for like the WebSocket aspect of it.
I don't think so, because
I don't think so either.
Because you just need to expose the Wave server part. The Wave application part doesn't need to be exposed at all. And since Wave server is the one that handles WebSockets, then it should work.
Right.
smoothly.
I think it just tells the browser, hey, we're upgrading to WebSockets. Let's keep going. And that
exactly.
should go through Nginx, I would guess. Okay, that way, like I could do, say, I could do Let's Encrypt over and all that management stuff at the Nginx level.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, this sounds good. The reason I ask is I know there's a bunch of data scientists who don't want to do that, but there's also people like me who are mostly programmers, but have a business with a bunch of dashboards that might be cool to build. And I've already got 8 servers and a bunch of stuff. I could easily host it on one of them. So for me, I could set it up and use it. Like I'm asking in a indirect but more broad sense, like how is this is useful for people beyond just the traditional I want slightly more than Jupyter crowd, right?
Yes, exactly. And we even think that it might be useful for maybe people like you, who are more of a software engineer. My boss likes to say that we would like to compete with Django, although our it's not really direct competition. Let's say, I would say, because Django requires you to know HTML and CSS and JavaScript, whereas we don't. But at the people side, we want to target also what's Python developers.
Sure. If you're doing pure HTML, which Django serves up, you can start bringing in designers and front end people, right? There's a different kind of app that often gets built, or can be built, but especially if you're talking about businesses, like 80% of the apps that they actually build are just like forms over data. I need to see what's in the database, select a thing, filter a thing, click, do something to it, and that's the entire app, right? And it sounds like these wave apps might be a good fit for. It doesn't have to look like Airbnb landing page. What it needs to do is show me this stuff and let people get to it quick and select them and make some actions real quickly, right? Without spending weeks to do it.
Exactly.
Would it be good for those kind of apps?
Definitely. We also have success stories related to that, because we had some, let's say, product people with some engineering skills or data science skills, and they needed some, let's say, small internal app that would allow them, for example, to bring people to give trial access to people to our cloud platform. And this needed to be done by backend developers before, because there was no infrastructure supporting it. So one of our product managers went ahead and built a web app that did exactly that. It listed all the pending trial users and allowed you to basically give them access, and that's it, right? It's a very small application, but it was built in no time with a tremendous value. So
yeah,
definitely.
And you have all the widgets you need. You've got buttons. You can type in various things. You can sort of build up this interaction, right? You've got drop downs and search and the make it happen type of buttons. Do you have grids?
Yes, it's called table. If you search for it, and it's one of the
Do the table search. There you go.
yeah. And basically, this is one of the fundamental components for data scientists, right? Because you want to showcase your data sets, and this is like the perfect component for it.
Yeah, even have little cool circular progress bars, those are really nice looking widgets. Yeah, very good. And then I guess you even have no, it wasn't page, it was filtering, but yeah, very, very cool.
Yes, we support search, filter, sort, even pagination if you want, and have really a lot of data.
Yeah, we didn't even really get a chance to go through all the widgets, but yeah, you've got most things I can imagine you want to use to build an app. You've got a color picker, you've got choice groups like a radio button, I'm presuming. You've got images, you've got file upload. Do you have a video player?
Not yet, but it should land soon because we are working on a video annotator component, which should basically be also usable as a video player.
Okay, so you have a text annotator, and this would be the kind of the same thing, and also an image annotator. That's on the ML side, where you say, here's the thing I'm going to feed my model. Tell it that this is a person and that is a cat. Don't let it think the cat is a person or whatever, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, cool. So you'll probably have the video player as a building block there, right?
Yes.
That sounds fun. Okay. Any other widgets you want to give a quick shout out to? I said there, I mean, there's a whole host of plotting. I guess also you can integrate with things like Altair and Plotly and Matplotlib. You don't have to stick with just your widgets.
Yes, and you can even go to overlay sections, and we have things like dialogues, sidebars, etc., notification bars, whatever you can think of. And
Nice.
if there is something that you need and is not there, you can always file a feature request.
Yep, and that'll land on your desk or on your screen, and you'll think about it. Perfect. Well, it certainly looks like a capable platform, and the ability to take it and just go run with it and deploy it, pretty excellent. And if people out there and they don't want to deploy it, then you have a business for them, business offering.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, very cool. All right, real quickly, because like I said, we're getting short on time. Two things. Let me pull up the app here. So you have themes, right? If there's like 5 or 6 different ways in which your site can look, and you can just apply a theme, or you can create custom themes. Or if you want to go crazy, you can actually include custom CSS, right?
Yes, but you probably most likely don't want to do that. But if you want to, you are free to go.
Okay, yeah, there's a way to create a UI widget that is a meta head element where you can say include this JavaScript either off your server or off a CDN.
Yes.
Or CSS. Yeah. Oh, and also the other thing I want to touch on is JavaScript support.
Yes, so basically we support arbitrary JavaScript as well. You just include your script as if you did in, let's say, Django or whatever of these other server-side frameworks, and you are good to go. The example should be called inline script or script if you... Yes, and whatever you wish.
There we go. How about this one? Yeah, so what's interesting is there's a way to set up in JavaScript to push back into the Wave app and trigger that function to run with new arguments, right?
Yes, exactly. So that's how you can basically bridge the gap between JavaScript and Python. You can send your data back to Python.
JavaScript, you just say wave.emit and the event, and then arguments basically, right?
Exactly.
Okay, well, it's always nice to have these escape hatches. You know, like it's 85% of what I need. I just need a little bit something different here. And if I could just put 2 lines of JavaScript, I know I could get there, or I need to style this just a little bit differently.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Cool. All right, Martin. Well, very cool project that you're working on here. Congrats on getting it out there. It looks like it's pretty popular. People are definitely digging it. And also, I love the Command K stuff that you have here on your homepage, where you can just instantly jump in and like search around. That's pretty cool. But 3,000 GitHub stars looks like a cool framework. Not exactly a direct head-to-head competitor to Django and Flask, but not that far off either, right?
Not yet, but let's hope that one day.
Give it a year or two. Okay, cool. I love it. All right, now before you get out of here, got the final 2 questions for you. If you're going to write some code, what editor do you use?
I prefer VS Code with the wonderful Vim extension. I cannot live without it anymore. Mm-hmm. However, I do think that the PyCharm has much better language support. So, but I prefer VS Code because I need to jump between multiple languages.
Cool, got it. And I'm sure that you run the Wave extension or plugin there as well, right?
Yes, of course.
Of course. And the notable PyPI package, something you find interesting or you want to recommend?
There are many, of course, but maybe one that I would like to give a shout out to is Playwright, and that's basically end-to-end testing framework, something like Cypress. But what I found that it can be used for much more than just end-to-end testing. We use it for visual regression testing. We use it for generating our imagery into documentation. And I have even done some load tests using that as well. So it's a pretty versatile tool.
Yeah, it's like the new Selenium, sort of.
Exactly.
Yeah. I did interview Andy Knight 3-4 months ago about this. Playwright is really neat. If I had to do visual testing or testing where I kind of interact with the UI, definitely what I would pick these days.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, Martin, final call to action. People want to get started with Wave. What do they do?
They can either go to our docs, which is wave.h2o.ai, or they can start on our GitHub repository, and they will find their way there, I believe. And maybe just a quick note, we are participating in Hacktoberfest, so if you feel like you would like to contribute to open source, then you are more than welcome.
Nice. Okay. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Hacktoberfest, but maybe some aren't. What's the story there?
So basically, Hacktoberfest is a month-long celebration of open source, and it encourages people to contribute back to open source. And if they do 4 valid pull requests, then they might be eligible for a swag or t-shirt.
Cool. And it is October, recording on October 3rd. So awesome. Get out there and be part of it. That sounds fun. Well, Wave sounds like a really cool framework. We have so many choices, and I love that it takes advantage of some of these modern Python ideas like async and await and whatever else you want to bring into it. So very cool work. Thanks for being on the show to share it with us.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Yeah, you bet. Bye.
Bye.